Ahoy, you salty sailors. Time to raise anchor and set sail for your best scrawny life. Arr.
We've had a long stretch of weather with daytime high temperatures in the upper 90s and very high humidity, making the heat index over 100 degrees. So I'm running this red glow effect on all the footage to remind you that it is quite hot. And of course, the metabolic rate of cold-blooded creatures such as fish is regulated by the ambient temperature they're surrounded with. And in this case, the water is nearly bathwater warm, so their metabolism is cranked all the way to 11, but at the same time, the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water is falling. And as well, in these small rivers, the water level itself is falling, meaning they will heat up faster on a hot day. So the combination of all these factors drives some unusual behavior in the fish. Smallmouth jump higher, fight harder, but at the same time are at a greater risk of dying. Here's a bullhead striking a fly. How often do you see that? And there was a whole school of them that I caught one after another. And what's this? A quillback striking a fly? Almost unheard of. Now it's hooked a bit strangely. It's hooked in the nose, so it's hard to say whether it was trying to eat the fly or whether it just didn't get out of the way quick enough. But in either case, that's relatively odd behavior for one of these fish. And these hot stretches are usually a good time to target carp, the common carp, Cyprinus carpio, because their activity level is just up to a frenzy, and they fight even harder in the hot weather like this with their metabolism cranked up. But in this case, since they were just dug into that cover so deeply, could not make a good presentation in spite of them feeding at an accelerated rate. And for our metric system, friends, we're talking about daytime high temperatures between 32 and 37 degrees, with the heat index, the combined effect of heat and humidity, well over 38 degrees. And here we see a new bridge was constructed, which closed one of the access points. So the drop down wasn't too bad, but hauling the kayak back up in that heat was not fun. And ambush predators like smallmouth bass begin behaving differently when the water is this warm. Whereas normally they would be hiding in an off-current pocket waiting for something to pass by that they can ambush. Here you see a slow current pocket with some shade. You would think that would be a good spot, but instead, watch this fish strike in the middle of the river. It's out there chasing minnows where the current is strong, just because its metabolism is cranked up so high. And he certainly seems to want under that log, and he's putting up a tremendous fight, diving under the log over and over. Here we see a pretty good bend in the rod. That's a 6-weight rod, so no slouch, this fish. Definitely giving a good account of himself, and that again is just because their metabolism is cranked up in this heat. Finally brought to hand. I mean, it's decent, but it's not huge, and for the size of the fight that it had in it, especially. So here we see once again, I can't help myself, just force of habit. I'm casting to that shady off-current pocket, that nice eddy that's developed below this riffle. Normally that would be a prime spot. You would expect to catch a good smallmouth right in that riffle, right in that eddy, or perhaps in the break line between the fast current and slow. But instead, watch this fish hit right behind a boulder where the current is strong. So they're definitely more of an active feeding strategy. In this case, this is more normal. That's sort of an ambush predator type of behavior. But there were small bass scattered all across this boulder garden, where the current was strong and where it was slow. So it was, yeah, they take a more active approach when the water is this warm. It's exciting, fast action sort of fishing in one sense, but it's worrying in another sense. It's definitely not their normal behavior mode. And here we've spotted a baby soft-shell turtle, which heads under an undercut bank as the shadowy figure approaches. And here we have a foot check. Yep, still got him. Can't get down. Can't get down on my knees as quick as I could when I was younger. But do we see any sign of that turtle? Yes, something's moving. Oh, there he is. The soft-shell turtle has been spotted. There's a bit of a struggle. Even a small one is quite strong. He takes a taste of the human, decides this one is too salty and scrawny to make a meal of, more like convenience store beef jerky than a juicy steak. And notice he's not, it's too hot to even hide in the shell for him. He's just hanging out of the shell, and he says, if you want to throw down, boy, I'm your huckleberry. And so, too hot for the shell. And look how fast they swim. Look at those little back legs. They can swim remarkably fast when they want to. A really cool little creature. He will reap the benefits, I suppose, if fish do begin dying. And here we can see the very first fish to go, of course, are the northern pike. After them, various species of the native suckers, catastomids, the fast water suckers that seem to require a certain amount of dissolved oxygen, begin to die off. Here, if you look off to the left side of the boat, you can see a school of suckers scattering across this rocky glide. So they're still feeding in their normal positions and so forth. But yes, if this heat continues, the suckers begin dying, and that directly impacts the larger predators. The suckers in these rivers are the food of the largest fish. You knock that out, and you knock out the largest fish, and it will take many years for the river to recover. From just 1 week of very high temperatures. But having said that, let me step back and just say that I as an individual and we as a species need to be very careful about imposing a teleos, about drawing some arbitrary line in the sand and saying this is the way things ought to be. These creatures compete with each other, and they always have, and rivers change, and the planet changes, and it always has been in a state of constant change, and the creatures that inhabit them are always in a state of struggle, competition, and an effort to adapt to changing conditions. That is their normal. There isn't a ideal state that is the way things ought to be. We can all see that something is out of balance with this river. It shouldn't look like this. So of course we should try to limit our impact, our pollution on the environment as much as possible. And of course we should try to preserve species that are at risk of extinction. But the way things ought to be, or the way things were in the good old days, or make the Mississippi drainage great again, is perhaps a step too far. I had almost said that certain sucker species could serve as indicators of the health of the river system, but held myself back when I realized it required that presumptive ideal state, which, if followed to its logical conclusion, would no doubt turn out to be as artificial and selfish and disastrous as pollution or extinction. Whoops, looks like it's time for a clam rescue. It was trapped in a side pool that's drying up. We'll bring him back to the main channel, a little better place for him to survive. But now we must ask the question, is that the way things ought to be? Was that a good decision morally or a bad one? It worked out good for the clam, I suppose, but that's a creature without a brain. But on the other hand, perhaps that clam could have been trapped in that side channel, could have become food for a raccoon. And perhaps now that raccoon will starve to death. So we just have to be careful about imposing our ideas about the way things ought to be. Gar don't seem to be adversely affected by the heat at all, and they may gain some territory, a few river miles if smallmouth bass begin dying. And then there you can see the metabolism of this particular bass running at full speed. Let's wind that back. Look how high he comes out of the water. Wow. I mean, that's a powerful leap. Puts up a tremendous fight. I mean, it's once again, it's a decent sized bass, but it's not a giant. But he sure fought like one. But I don't think we're at much risk of a smallmouth die off. Uh, it can happen, but that would be quite extreme. We're not really at the southern end of the smallmouth range as we are the southern end of the northern pike range. Their range extends down into the Ozarks and so forth. Here's another one. Comes nearly 6 feet out of the water and spits the fly at the peak of his jump. We're really just stoked to the gills. And here we have a very interesting fish. This was a gar that was fully melanistic. In other words, it's head to tail, back to belly, everything was jet black. And they are pigmented with the same pigment that human beings are, melanin. So it's just that that's what color their skin is, and then you overlay that with scales, and you get some different color variations. But as far as I know, they're only pigmented with melanin. So here I've dropped off the filter, and you can see what the original footage looked like, and you can tell that fish is solid black, just jet black, just an amazing looking fish. Couldn't get him to jump over that log, and eventually lost him. So that seems to always happen with these melanistic gar. And our mystery plant, as would befit this episode, belongs to the family Asteraceae, the sunflower family, of the tribe Heliantha. It has bizarre looking leaves and is quite tall, with a composite flower, and it is, of course, Silphium perfoliatum, commonly known as compass plant or cup plant or rosinweed. And here we see what is meant by a perfoliate leaf. What would be two opposite leaves are instead conjoined into one, and the stem comes through the leaf, the word perfoliatum meaning through the leaf. In this case, forming that cup structure that can sometimes hold rainwater. Now, this plant does produce a taproot, but also rhizomes that can spread out and produce a perennial colony. And of course, what appears to be the flower is actually a composite of many small flowers. Those outer florets with the fused petals, and then you see the fertile flowers inside that. Some of the disc florets, I think, are just structural in nature. Anyway, it's an interesting plant, one we might go a little deeper on later.